Are you thinking about moving to the Metro West area of Boston? I've lived here my whole life, and my team member and friend Dede relocated here about 10 years ago. And today we're going to do something kind of fun. We're going to share our perspectives as a native and a relocating executive. We're going to do this game show style. So I'm a little excited. Dede and I don't know. Our producer is going to ask us some questions. We're going to compare answers and see what we come up with. So we hope you enjoy. I'm Jane. I'm a realtor based in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Dede and I sell real estate all over Greater Boston, and our channel is all about helping you get relocated to our area. So please subscribe, and if you're thinking of moving here, please reach out as we would love to help. First question is, for recreational activities, what's the best thing about living in Boston? Go ahead, Dede. What's your number one?
Okay, I put the diversity of seasonal athletic opportunities. So no matter if it's winter, spring, or summer, there's always something you can do. Skiing, golf, and boating.
Oh, nice. Okay. So I also put skiing, and my two others were walking trails and beaches. So
Awesome. Okay.
I guess they're kind of similar.
Yeah, I think so.
And neither of us play golf, so it was kind of funny. But if we wanted to, we could.
That's it.
And if you want to play pickleball here, we can find you a league. We know so many people who play pickleball, but we don't do that either. What's the worst thing about the recreational activities in Boston?
This is where the difference in living here and relocating here might make a difference. So I put, sometimes the access is tricky to some of these things. If you're here, if you've grown up here, then you're networked enough that you can still, be able to do those things. But I think it takes a little bit of time.
For example, like I have access to beaches that are not necessarily open to the public because I know somebody with a boat who lives in Dartmouth. My husband's family grew up going to Situate. So yeah, there is a bit of a towny mentality here until you get plugged into your community.
Yeah. And
so,
I have an example too.
Let me hear your example.
Right. My example is we wanted to go skiing. We weren't quite aware of how far in advance those things book up. So being able to meet and learn about that sort of community and how far in advance you need to book things, and then getting invited by people who had long-term established relationships at some of the ski resorts helped us get access.
Yeah. I would say another thing that I didn't like when my kids were little, and I don't think this is unique to New England or to Boston, but kids' activities are too planned and managed. Yeah. Nobody grew up, does what we did growing up, going out and playing and coming home when someone banged a gong, it was time for dinner. Things are a little bit more structured. The good news is when your kids are good at sports, like Dede's daughter is quite talented at volleyball. She's a high school volleyball player. And my kids did, football and rowing and dance. So if your children are interested in particular activities, there's lots of places where you can go perform and find your people. Education system living in Metro West of Boston. Best things.
Yes, okay.
So Dede, what did you put?
So I put that many towns, if not all, are consistently ranked in the top of an exemplary system. This, the state of Massachusetts has excellent education. The fact that many of these towns are going to give you that quality, you have a lot to pick from as opposed to, just this one system in the middle of a cluster of towns. So I think that's really, really important. It also drives the demand for these towns so that, if once your child is aged out of the system or what have you, they are still very desirable. So there's both the personal component to that as well as the business side for when you want to resell later.
And I would add that Massachusetts is committed to supporting kids with special needs and learning disabilities. So you do find that kids with learning differences are very well served in the public school system. Like in Wellesley, for example, different elementary schools have an expertise in different types of learning differences, which I think is unusual.
It is.
And we're blessed to have it.
And frankly, when I relocated, that was actually a consideration for our daughter. And so from a personal perspective, I really want to echo that. Yeah. It's one reason we moved to the town we're in.
So what's the worst thing about the education system in Metro West? And I know this is a short answer, and so I'm just going to start talking. Highly competitive, and sometimes that's too competitive. If you have children that are not necessarily high-performing students, it can be a frustrating place to live. And I have, of my three kids, two of them really thrived in a super competitive environment and one not so much. And then I had a friend whose son, if you wanted to go on a different path, her son wanted to be a firefighter. And you don't find a lot of people who have moved to Wellesley because their kids want to grow up and be a firefighter. But of course, that's a worthy profession and an admirable job and something everybody needs. And he struggled to find his community, but she found him a camp for kids who wanted to become firefighters. That is something And actually, our own department has a summer camp for kids to learn. They can go and ride in the truck and spray the hose and learn how to be a firefighter.
That's so great.
As an example.
Yeah. Well, I must say, I also wrote down competitive. It is very, very competitive, and there's a balance between the achievement that you want to see your child have and the pressure from the fellow students. It's not really coming so much. I mean, the students are supported and they are nurtured and so forth. There's a real investment from these schools, which is one of the reasons why that they are so well ranked. But it really comes from this drive, and I think that part and parcel goes to the benefit of Boston at large, which is a really extensive university system that is very well regarded. So it's cool to be smart around here, but it's also, you just have to be able to balance that a little bit.
Community in Metro West of Boston, what is the best thing?
Yes, I'm ready.
You go first.
Okay. I actually wrote down the diversity. That for me was important, and I think I'm really speaking from a multifaceted concept of diversity. So not just the diversity in the sense that we think, because frankly there are some towns where that may not be such a strength, but the diversity of world experience, of people who move here, relocate here from all over the country all the time, a lot due to the industries that we have just up the road from us. And I think, there's a wealth of things that you can do, whether it's, so the diversity is not necessarily just in the population, in the community that way, but what I mean is you'll have artists, you'll have, professors, there are opportunities to go to courses and lectures and book signings and all sort of things like that. And it's just a short train ride away from Metro West, which is great. So that for me was really important. I still wanted to maintain the feeling of having my single family, having that school system that could cater to the needs of our child. But I didn't want to have to either live downtown and give up my yard, etc. So I feel like the location is great. That really enhances that diversity of experience and community in that way for us.
Yeah. So when people are relocating here, one of the things that people ask about is how do we get plugged into our community? I usually default to telling you about Wellesley because that's where we live. Like there's something for every stage of your life here. So when you're new, there's a Wellesley Mothers Forum if you have children. It's a social and educational group for mothers of young children. And so I was very active in that. And there was a working moms group, which I always tell my working moms you should join that because it can be very isolating to relocate here if you're a working mom because you're so busy working. And Dede experienced this herself because before she got into real estate, she was traveling quite a bit and it was very hard to get plugged in.
Definitely.
Then as you age out of that, the elementary schools are very active in helping you create community. But eventually your kids, get older. And I remember having a friend, she had 3 kids and her youngest went to middle school and she's like, I'm so lonely. I don't know what to do with myself. And I said, well, you need to join the Wellesley Service League, which was another social service organization. I went through that for 5 years. And then my friend did join, she loved it. And now we're in a gardeners guild. And so there's a newcomers club, there's a postcomers club, there are all different ways to find your people. And I'm going to mention this again. I'm not kidding. Pickleball really seems to be a thing for lots of people to get plugged in.
That really is. And you know what? I love that talk about the different stages and as your children are aging, or even frankly, if you don't have children, we always want to highlight that as well, because certainly there are many, many people who relocate here that are not either at the point to have any, or this is not part of their life plan.
Or you're past that.
That's right. Or maybe, exactly right. Maybe you're empty nesters, and there's just a tremendous amount of diversity in what you can do at those different stages. And I will say too, as a transplant, that you locals are quite welcoming, Jane. I have to say, I've lived all over the country. I moved around a lot for work, and I really did not expect this similarity from the Midwest to be present out on the East Coast, but there's a very strong commitment to volunteer time here, which I find to be wonderful. And that to me says a lot about the quality and the character of the people who live here. And that has all these benefits that Jane's talking about for people like us who are like me rather, who have moved and trying to build that foundation and that structure for our families. So
I always joke we're friendlier than people say.
That's true.
Or expect. And then to Dede's point, there are a lot of people who have relocated here from all over the place. So like our elementary school, there were kids who lived in Australia and everywhere. So that gives the kids some experience that they might not get, I don't know.
Definitely.
Where you don't have relocating people.
That's very true.
What is the worst thing about community in Metro West of Boston? Let's give this some thought. I got nothing.
I have one.
What do you have?
The Relo girl has one. Okay, so I put, and I don't like the word worst, if I can push back there, but I think think something that has to be managed, which is true all across the board, and Jane mentioned it when we talked about some of the best things education-wise and other, is that there's sometimes pressure, right, to be engaged in everything. So you have to learn, okay, if I'm going to do, and this actually just happened with Jane and I, she graciously invited me to be in service league. But then after we chatted about the responsibilities and the commitment, my daughter is in a travel club for volleyball. I am, I've been in every Motel 6 between here and New York City, right? So I'm not capable of my best work at this point for the service league. So it's better to defer that. I think that our hearts, when especially you relo and you're trying to build in and network in, is to try and jump onto everything, and they'll take you. As I said earlier, they're very, very committed to volunteer work here. So my advice as a newcomer is to pick one or maybe two things and to try and master that and build a network there. You will naturally be pulled into other things, learn to say no, and then, sort of balance that. It's the same challenge you have with your children. As Jane was talking about, everything's very, very scheduled, whereas back in the day, we used to all run around in the yard and come home when the light was flipped. Now it's that they've got something immediately out of school until bedtime, and when do you do homework? So it's that same challenge, I think, for grown-ups in a little bit of a different way when you reload. I would say that would be, for me, the one thing I would caution people moving here to think about.
And that's interesting because when we talk about, I did not realize that the volunteer is something endemic of New England or Greater Boston. And also, it's not junior leaguey. It's not like you have to be, all fancy. We have all kinds of different things, and I never really thought about that as a benefit of living in Metro West.
Yeah, and I can tell you, perhaps it's me that's noticing this specifically because I am a sustainer in junior league. And junior league, when I joined it, was in fact a lot of, and social's important, it's great, but there wasn't as much roll your sleeves up work. Out here, it's really, really focused. The social is sort of the byproduct, but the intent is the actual volunteer. And by no means am I slamming any junior league people watching this. I'm just giving you some perspective.
Yeah. In fact, we don't really even have junior league. No. We have something called have something called juniors, but it's not the junior league. And usually there is a nice social component, but we volunteer at food pantries.
Yes.
We clean up. We make butterfly gardens. We clean up trash. We pull up invasive species of plants in our walking paths. All kinds of stuff like that.
Definitely.
So thank you for watching. If you're thinking of relocating to the Metro West area of Boston, please reach out as we'd love to help you. Please remember to subscribe. So yeah, that was a super good time.
It was a great time. I love seeing how our answers were kind of complimentary.
Indeed. We'll see you on the next video.